What up, people? When I first bought my Nintendo Switch all the way back in, I think, 2017, I quickly realized how many amazing RPGs are available, and some exclusively on the portable console. Whether it's turn-based, action, strategy, or adventure, Switch owners have almost an endless well of high-quality RPGs to choose from. And because of that, I thought I would take it upon myself to compile a list of essential RPGs for Switch owners to play. But before we start, if you're new to the channel, I make videos on single player games with a heavy focus on RPGs. If that's something that interests you and you end up enjoying this video, consider subscribing and hitting that like button to help with the algorithm. And with the sell promo out of the way, here are 10 must-buy RPGs for the Nintendo Switch. Let's start the list off with something recent, and that's Super Mario RPG. Coming out in November of last year, this game is a modern remake of 1996's game, Super Mario RPG Legend of the Seven Stars. Some of the notable design changes include all the characters being seemingly shorter to match their modern designs, and also the whole game now being in 3D. The combat uses a traditional turn-based system with active time elements or speed contributing extra attacks. One of the more innovative features of the combat was the inclusion of time button press sequences, which later became a mainstay of all Mario RPGs. One of my favorite RPGs from last year was Sea of Stars, which I'll probably talk about that game if I decide to make a part 2. But the reason I bring that game up is because developers talked about how Super Mario RPG was such a huge influence when making the combat for that game, and that's what made me interested in trying out Super Mario RPG in the first place. So, if you're a fan of turn-based RPGs, why not try the remake of one of the best ever made? Next on the list, we have Pokemon Legends Arceus. This action RPG was released in 2022, and to my knowledge is the first modern Pokemon game to fully embrace open world. The game takes place in the Hisui region, which is an ancient version of the Sinnoh region long before the events of Diamond and Pearl. After choosing your starter and getting to the tutorial stage, you'll be able to travel around the open world, explore, and also obviously catch Pokemon. For me and many others, this is the real highlight of the game. People have always joked about wanting a Pokemon Breath of the Wild, and even though Pokemon Violet and Scarlet exist, a lot of people tell you that they prefer this game when it comes to the open world aspect. Players can capture wild Pokemon in the overworld without engaging in battle, though some of them you'll still have to fight if you want to catch them. Battles can be initiated simply by releasing your Pokemon anywhere near a wild Pokemon that you're interested in. Now, when it comes to actual battling, it's similar to the old Pokemon format, but with a new style mechanic, which includes a strong style and an agile style. Basically, strong style moves increases the move's power but decreases the Pokemon's move speed, while the agile style decreases the move's power but increases the Pokemon's move speed. Using a move in either strong or agile style uses twice as much PP as using the normal version of that move. Also, there are no gym battles in this game. Instead, there are these boss battles with normal Pokemon, which are these giant and powerful uncatchable Pokemon that you have to defeat. Funny enough, while this for many is one of their favorite, if not their favorite Pokemon game in the past decade, I honestly got kind of sick of it pretty fast. I think part of it was because of how long the tutorial portion was, and I also wasn't the biggest fan of those boss fights I just talked about. I know me saying that might sound weird as I have this in a must-buy list, but I try to make a point sometimes to separate my feelings about a game if I'm positive that other people will enjoy it. But anyway, longtime Pokemon fans have been kicking and screaming for Game Freak to switch up the formula a little bit when it comes to this iconic franchise, and Pokemon Legends Arceus is a fantastic representation of the possibilities that can happen when they choose to do so. At number 8, we have Disco Elysium: The Final Cut. Disco Elysium is an isometric RPG originally released in 2019, with the Final Cut being a free definitive update that includes new clothes, characters, words, and the biggest thing being the game now being fully voice acted. The game takes place in the seaside district of the fictional city of Elysium that's recovering from a siege which occurred decades prior to the game's start. You'll be taking on the role of an amnesiac detective who has been tasked with solving a murder mystery. During that investigation, he comes to recall events about his own past as well as current forces trying to affect the city. The gameplay features no combat in the traditional sense. Instead, it is handled all through skill checks and dialogue trees. There are 4 primary abilities in this game: Intellect, Psyche, Physique, and Motorics. Each ability has 6 distinct secondary skills for a total of 24. The player improves these skills through skill points earned from leveling up. Upgrading these skills helps the player pass skill checks based on a random dice roll, but it can potentially result in negative effects and character quirks, which basically makes it so there really isn't a right or wrong way to level up your character, so just pick whatever interests you the most. What I like the most about Disco Elysium is how so many of the characters and quests are tethered together by various things throughout the game. There are so many times that I met a character early on that was related to a quest I would get like 6 or 7 hours later, or I would randomly discover an item that would unlock a secret mission or dialogue choice from a character whose help I needed with something. Exploring and finding unique ways to tackle issues is really satisfying and is easily the biggest highlight of this game. Disco Elysium has been universally praised for its writing and even won Best Narrative and Best RPG at the Game Awards the year of its release. With this game being so dialogue focused, it's perfect to play on a couch or in your bed with your Switch. So if you're someone who's big on well-written characters and immersive storytelling, I can promise you there's literally no better game on this list than Disco Elysium. Next up at number 7, we have the Borderlands Legendary Collection. This bundle includes Borderlands 1, 2, the pre-sequel, and all 3 games DLC. While all 3 games are amazing, during this section, I'll mostly be talking about Borderlands 2 as it's one of my top 5 all-time favorite games. The thing I like the most about the Borderlands series is that it took a genre that I hated, which are first-person shooters, and somehow still made me love the game. And the way it did that was with all the RPG elements that it implemented. You have multiple skill trees that can drastically change your playstyle even with the same character. You have different type of shields, grenades, and class mods that can enhance whatever build you're going for. Plus, on top of that, there are so many guns that you're bound to find something that fits the way you want to play perfectly. Borderlands 2 was so good that it made me stop hating games like Call of Duty and Apex Legends. So if you're someone who's never tried or had an interest in shooting before, I believe there's enough RPG in Borderlands 2 and the Legendary Collection to not only keep your attention, but also make you an avid fan as well. Next up is Nier Automata, the End of Yorha edition. This action RPG was developed by Platinum Games and initially published by Square Enix in 2017, and later on then released on the Switch in 2022. The game is set during a proxy war between alien-created machines and human-crafted androids, focusing on the actions of Combat Android 2B, Scanner Android 9S, and Rogue Prototype A2. The story requires multiple playthroughs to get a complete experience, with each playthrough providing more and more story elements. Combat includes a real-time action-based hack-and-slash system with using both light and heavy attacks and combining them into different combination attacks. The player can also evade incoming attacks, gaining invulnerability or counter-attack bonuses based on timing. The player is assisted by a robot companion known as the Pod, which launches range attacks varying from simple gunfire to heavy-hitting hammer attacks. Character customization is handled through attribute-changing items called chips. Chips can alter the HUD, add new abilities, and grant status buffs to your characters. The number of chips that can be installed at any one time is limited to the number of slots a character has. Chips can either be purchased at shops or collected from defeated enemies. I played this game on my PS4, so I can't personally speak on how well it runs on Nintendo Switch, but the Digital Foundry video I watched says it runs perfectly well despite the limitations of the Switch, so you should be fine. While hack and slash games usually aren't my thing, Nier Automata does so much well that it's worth being an exception to the rule. Starting off the top 5, we have a new entry from the grandfather of turn-based RPGs with Dragon Quest XI Echoes of an Elusive Age Definitive Edition. Like I said, this is the 11th entry into the iconic series, and this enhanced port of the original Dragon Quest XI was released in December of 2020. Some of the main updates with this definitive version include extra content, faster battle speeds, new orchestral versions of the soundtrack, and being able to switch between 3D and 2D game modes. This was my first ever Dragon Quest game, so going into it, I didn't really know what to expect. But the first thing that stood out to me was how amazing the monster design was. I'm really big on creature designs, which is why I love old Pokemon and Digimon games, and the designs of the creatures in Dragon Quest XI are up there in that group, at least in my opinion. The combat, while simple, is very fun and addicting, and the music, while being the first time I ever heard it, it already sounded iconic, if that makes any sense. When I was watching reviews for this game, one of the reviewers called the game comfort food, meaning that you know exactly what you're going to get when you play it and you love it for that exact reason, and I couldn't agree more. While not reinventing the wheel in any way, when it comes to combat, music, story, and art design, it doesn't really have any glaring weaknesses and delivers a solid and very fun overall package that I think all turn-based and JRPG fans should experience. Just missing out on a top 3 spot, we have Xenoblade Chronicles Definitive Edition. This action RPG is a remastered port of the original Xenoblade Chronicles, which was released in 2012. The Definitive Edition improves the graphics of the original while also providing new remastered music, updated UI, a new epilogue, and much more. When it comes to combat, the Xenoblade Chronicles series uses a real-time action-based battle system where the player manually moves a character in real time and party members will auto-attack when enemies enter their attack radius. Arts may also be performed, but in a limited fashion. Battle arts are only available after a cooldown period that occurs after every use, with character-specific talent arts only become available after enough auto attacks are executed. You'll also be heavily encouraged to explore this open world when playing Xenoblade Chronicles, and after discovering new locations and landmarks, you can use them as fast travel points. It's kind of funny because I actually got into this series in a very weird way. To try and quickly sum it up, I initially started with Xenoblade Chronicles 2, didn't really like it, the combat didn't click with me, so I dropped it. About 2 or so years later, bought Xenoblade Chronicles 3, loved it almost immediately. Then went online to see if it was okay to start with 3, and then everybody said story-wise the third game ties the first 2 together, and since I'm big on story and big payoffs in stories, decided to buy this definitive edition of the first game. The one last positive thing I want to talk about is the music. I'm not over-exaggerating when I say that this game has some of the best music I've ever heard in any game, let alone an RPG. There's been so many times where I would just have the characters just standing in place just so I could listen to this amazing soundtrack. The game might be worth buying just for the music alone. Now, my one glaring issue with this game is actually the polar opposite to how I feel about the music. While this game has some of the best music, it also has quite possibly some of the worst side missions in any RPG I've ever played. Most of the missions I played so far is just simple, defeat X amount of monsters or bring me X amount of this or that. Now, I'm only like 15 hours into the game, so maybe they get better, but I highly doubt it. But anyway, while the combat took a long time for me to actually appreciate and enjoy, once it finally clicked with me, I was left with an amazing JRPG that more people need to give a chance. At number 3, we have Divinity Original Sin 2. This game is an isometric RPG with tactical turn-based combat, and it's also the 6th entry into the Divinity series. The game was made by Larian Studios, who are the creators of the beloved Baldur's Gate series. The game starts out with you picking a class and race. One of my favorite things about this game is how much the race and class you pick will affect your playthrough, especially your race. Some people will literally not speak to you if you are a certain race, which will close off the availability of certain quests unless you speak to them with a different character. Speaking of quests, Divinity really shines with how the different quests affect each other. Solving main missions a certain way may open up certain side missions, and completing certain side missions might help you figure out a different solution to one of your main missions. Having multiple storylines and characters affect your progression throughout the story really adds to the overall immersion of the game. But the part I'm sure you care the most about is combat, which is also very fun and addicting. In combat, each character takes turns to attack, with action points limiting the type and quantity of actions that can be utilized. Moving reduce action points based on distance travel, and attack and skills reduce action points based on usage requirements. Depending on the type of attack, it will damage either the magical or physical armor of the target. My favorite part of combat is how the environment can be such a huge advantage or disadvantage if you're not careful. Using arrows or magic from a higher position will be more damaging, creating steam can cause visibility issues, characters on fire will lose damage over time, and poison can hurt or heal depending on the character. There are way too many element combinations to name, plus it'll be way more fun to find out those things for yourself. One cool thing about this game is that you can cross-save with PC, and I also believe PlayStation consoles as well. So if you have one of those and want to go back and forth between stronger hardware and portability, that is an option. But I digress. Baldur's Gate 3 won Game of the Year last year, and this game is almost just as good in my opinion. So if you're a Switch owner who wanted to try Baldur's Gate 3 but couldn't, or you just want a new RPG that's different from what you're used to, I can almost guarantee that Divinity Original Sin 2 would not disappoint. Just missing out on the top spot, we have Persona 5 Royal. Being released on the Switch in 2022, Royal is an updated and enhanced version of the 2017 vanilla Persona 5. Gameplay involves going through dungeons or palaces as you fight and recruit personas, solve puzzles, and ultimately defeat the boss of each palace. When you're not doing that, you'll be spending time in the real world where you'll spend your time going to school, studying, working, or just enjoying the fun things to do in the city. You'll also be spending time with confidants, which will give you rewards and perks that will benefit you when you go back into the dungeons. Some of the new additions with this new version include a new semester, new confidants, and a whole new playable character and dungeon to explore. There's plenty of other changes and improvements including personas, music, and overall quality of life, but the biggest thing is the new character, dungeon, and third semester. If you already owned or played the original Persona 5, it's probably not enough to buy this new version, but if you haven't played it or are looking to replay it, then Royal is a no-brainer choice. Now, other than maybe Dragon Quest XI, this game is easily the longest on this list, with it taking almost 100 hours to beat. Now, I haven't beat Royal, but I beat the original on my PS4, and I believe my playtime was around 90 plus hours, and with the added content in Royal, 100 plus hours is probably accurate. And because of that, not being able to have to stare at my TV or gaming monitor the whole time will make the experience a lot more enjoyable in my opinion. The original Persona 5 was on a short list of games that I actually became addicted to. Constantly switching from dungeon crawling to social life activities made it so I never got sick of either, and it kept the gameplay loop fresh. And with Persona 5 Royal adding extra content and quality of life improvements to an already incredible game, it is now the definition of a must-buy for Nintendo Switch owners. Also, shout out to Futaba. At number 1, we have Fire Emblem Three Houses. This strategy RPG is the first mainline entry in the Fire Emblem series on the Nintendo Switch and the 16th mainline entry overall. If you've never played a Fire Emblem game before, it takes the standard strategy formula of moving units across a grid-based battlefield to fight, but it adds much more stakes to it. One of the ways it does that is by adding what's known as permadeath, which is a mechanic where if one of your units loses all their health, they're considered dead and you can't use them anymore. Now, you can always turn this feature off, and also Three Houses has this feature called Divine Pulse, which gets rid of that, but most fans of the series will advise you against it as it makes every decision you make during battle that much more crucial. Another unique feature, which is one of my favorite aspects of the game, are what's known as supports. Supports are bonds that lead to conversational skits between characters in the game. These conversations only happen if the bond and or the relationship between those two characters grow, whether it's through combat, by them fighting alongside each other, or through various events during your time in the monastery, such as sharing a meal, returning items, giving gifts, or having tea together. These support conversations do a great job of fleshing out these characters, or at the very least just making them feel like real people and not just silent units in the game. One thing that separates Three Houses from other Fire Emblem games is that any unit can be leveled up to any class you choose. Each unit has a suggested class for them to go into based off stats and skill sets, but anybody can literally be anything. Also, in most Fire Emblem games, you continually meet units as chapters go on, but in Fire Emblem Three Houses, all of your units, or should I say students, are separated into, you guessed it, 3 houses. Also, did I mention you're playing a teacher? Sorry about that. Anyway, you'll be playing as a professor and you'll have to choose one of the 3 houses to teach and fight alongside, but don't worry, you can recruit other students from different houses if you want. But some may be harder or time sensitive to recruit, so maybe look up a guide to be on the safe side. Speaking of the houses, while I've played many Fire Emblem games since I first bought Three Houses, the reason I love Three Houses so much is because of the story and characters of the house I personally chose, which is the Blue Lions. After a specific chapter and a story event happens, each house has their own separate story path to follow, and the Blue Lion story for me was amazing. I also like the fact that the Blue Lion students felt the most like a family. Dimitri, Ingrid, Felix, and Sylvain were all childhood friends. Mercedes and Annette were best friends to the point of being pretty much sisters, and the support conversation between them and also Ash and Dedu makes this whole group seem really close, which makes you want to keep them all alive even more. I can honestly say that Fire Emblem Three Houses is not only one of my favorite strategy RPGs, but one of the best RPGs I've ever had the privilege of playing. It's kind of crazy how a game I bought almost on a whim made me such a huge fan of a franchise, but that's exactly what happened. Three Houses that led me to buy all the Fire Emblem games on the 3DS, including Fire Emblem Awakening, Fates, Shadow of Valentia, and I'm almost done with Fire Emblem Engage, which came out on the Switch last year. If you haven't played this game because of it being in the strategy RPG genre, I would strongly advise you to give Fire Emblem Three Houses a chance because it's a great entry point into the franchise. If you're anything like me, your only regret will be that you didn't play these amazing games sooner. Okay, that's all the games I have for you today, guys. What RPGs would you recommend for the Nintendo Switch? Let us know in the comments. If you want some more game recommendations, click the link on the screen, and as always, don't forget to like and subscribe to keep up with the channel. Later.